Welcome to the Executive Coaching Podcast, where Executive Coach Alicia Cowan will discuss leadership topics and coaching solutions to tackle the most difficult problems that keep you from leading your team to success.
Hi there, leaders. It's Alicia Cowan, and welcome to episode number 38. As I'm recording this, it's late April, and around the Cowan house, we are wrapping up the end of the school year with about a month to go, which is just wild to me how fast the school year has gone. And we've been finishing up the end of season after school activities as well. So really fun announcement to make. Last weekend, we were at a cheer competition for my 14-year-old daughter. She's a competitive cheerleader. And we were so excited to watch her win the national competition that she was a part of and her division. She was able to take first place with her team. So really fun weekend to celebrate. And then to round it out, my son had a swim meet and he won 3 out of his 4 events and got second in 1. So for his different strokes, he has been really working on them all year. And so really fun to watch both of them in their element and having a great time competing and being a part of the teams that they're involved in. And so fun to watch that. And this weekend, they're at a band competition. Both of them are in band for middle school. And so they're having a really fun day at Busch Gardens and being involved in all of that. So much going on as we wrap up the end of the year. I can't believe it. And again, around the Cowan house, we were working on a couple of different projects. We moved into our house, my goodness, I guess now 4 months ago, and we started construction on a pool. And that is coming along super well and super fast. The stone for all the pavers and the stone has been delivered, and it's sitting out in my front yard right now. And they're going to start working on that next. So it's coming along. And so we are hoping it'll be done just in time to wrap up the summer. So what we're talking about today, we're going to talk about transitioning roles as a senior leader. So I like to bring things that are coming from my clients and bring them out to you, to my broader audience, because I think, as I always say, if it's happening with multiple clients, it has to be happening for more of you out there. So I like to share what I'm talking about in a confidential way, of course, but share some of the themes that come up. And this week, I had 3 different clients reach out wanting help regarding a transition. And some of them are leaving roles or looking for different roles for lots of different reasons. One was in a current role that was just not a really great fit. It recently joined a company and just found that it was not what was promised as a part of the interview process. And so before jumping to a new role, this person's looking to secure a new role before leaving their current role. Another person completely left their role. They resigned and decided to take a leap because of a really bad situation with a toxic boss and a toxic situation that they just decided they had had enough and they did not want to be part of it anymore. And so took a lot of courage to jump and now is in a current job search. And the last person was in a current role and anticipating some downsizing and anticipating losing potential loss of a job. Again, not for certain, but really wanted to secure a new role and perhaps a new field before jumping ship, or perhaps before the inevitable happened and was trying to be more proactive in a search. So lots of different reasons, but ultimately, whether you are in this situation or not, I'm going to share some tips and tricks. So some of you may be looking to leave a role, a company, a culture, a toxic boss that isn't a good fit. Some of you have been experiencing layoffs. And as I look through LinkedIn and I kind of see the trends, it definitely does seem to be continuing. And some people are just seeking a new opportunity. Again, maybe nothing is going wrong, but they're looking for the next jump, the next career move, progression, whatever that may be. So lots of different situations of why you might be looking, but I'm going to give a couple of tips and tricks here that I think might be of help and definitely give some coaching perspective around the mindset you have to have as you're headed through a transition. So here's what we talked about this week. So number one, I think when you're making a transition, it's really important to do a reset. That's tip number one. So what I mean by that is that I think a lot of times when we're with an organization, we really start to intertwine our identity with our title, our job function, our role. And I think at times we need to separate ourselves from that. And what I mean is giving yourself the grace to say, I did these functions for this company and it was my job. And whatever, again, when you're a senior leader, a lot of times there is some prestige and some worth associated with that. We essentially equate our own value to that prestige of that level, that title, that role. And I want to say we have to be respectful and of course excited about the fact that we did achieve a certain level, but also separating the fact that we were exchanging the value that we were adding for that money and title, and giving ourselves that value that we were able to create, that gets to come with us no matter where we go. So even if we lose that title or lose that role, it doesn't separate from the fact that we were able to create that value that you brought to the table, that you were performing in that role. That all comes with you. And so a lot of times what I see is people lose their self-worth and they lose their confidence because of that separation of the job and the title. And I want to offer that it comes with you, right? And the value that you've created is within your brain. And again, I'm talking a lot about this is not, as a senior leader, typically you're not doing manual labor. You're not doing, right? You're not exchanging that type of value. You're exchanging brain power and you're exchanging ideas and problem solving and solutions and strategy, right? So that's the stuff that you cannot separate. So recognize that what you've learned and what assets that you've brought with your knowledge, it's still held within your brain, and know that you have the ability to create that value in another place. And so to say, I can remain with myself, my self-confidence and my self-worth intact, even if I'm not doing that job with that same title, with that organization. So that's what I mean by doing a reset. I think a lot of people need to almost separate and do that reset, and that separation of sense of self-worth and value and being associated with that role, and kind of reset their thought process and think about who they are and resetting what they believe is their value. Okay. So that's number one. Do that reset as you are either still in the current role or transitioning to the new role. Make sure you reset your mindset. And then the second one is a big one here. The second tip I like to share with people is to define exactly what you want. Think about what you want in your next company. Think about what you want in your next role. Okay. And just as easy as this, and perhaps easier, is to list out what you don't want in your company and your next role, and get really specific with this, like to know exactly what you want and what you don't want, and to have that on paper to be able to reference is so important. You have to know what you will and what you won't budge on. What will be a deal breaker for you? And then do not compromise on this. And again, you may have some things you want to compromise on, then that is perfectly okay, but also have your deal breaker and do not compromise list. And why I say this, and I think it's so important to go through this process before you jump into the job search, is because when you go out there and you start looking at roles, if you do not have the list, it's going to be really easy to start to perhaps not be discerning and start looking at specifically what you want, and to ask through interview process. And when you're networking, to ask for exactly what you're looking for. Because if you don't know, it's going to be really hard for people to help you define whether or not this role is going to be the right fit, or to offer opportunities that are going to be the right fit for you. So get really clear and define what you want. You would be surprised about how many people do not go through this process. So That's tip number 2. Tip number 3. All right. So get really clear. As a senior leader, you have to be able to define your brands and to be able to tell your story of your career well. You have to be able to, some people call this the elevator pitch, but you have to be able to tell your story well. As a senior leader, recently I met somebody who had been with an organization in the same role for a longer period of time, right? And they hadn't been in the interview process for a while, and they hadn't really been out there telling their story. And as they were interviewing, we're talking through this person about how they wanted to present themselves and what experience that they had, and trying to translate that into the role that they wanted. It was difficult for her. She was applying and looking for roles in which she hadn't had an obvious direct experience. However, she did have a lot of skill sets that would absolutely apply. And so some of that was not coming through in the way that she was articulating her story. And so I think it's really important to practice this and to be able to tell your story in a really cohesive, thoughtful way that is relevant to the job that you're applying for or the job that you want. And again, that's why it's so important to know what you want in a role and how you're going to talk about your applicable skills and tell your story well. Okay, so you got to get good at telling the story of your career and where you're headed to with these hiring managers, because otherwise, no one's going to be able to help you and understand if you can't articulate it yourself. So if you haven't been in the job hunt and you haven't been interviewing in a while, really important to work that out. All right. The next tip. As a senior leader, you are not going to get traction by just going at it alone. You are going to have to use your network. You are going to have to involve other people, and you're going to potentially have to employ some people to work on your behalf. Okay, so what do I mean by that? So I think we've all heard this. Networking is everything. And as a senior leader, it is gold. I have come across senior leaders that have ascended into their role because they've worked so hard and diligently at building their internal network within an organization. And they have perhaps neglected, because they've been working so hard internally at their company, they've neglected some of their external network and keeping connections and keeping relationships. So if you're in a current role, I implore you to make sure you have that network and build and continue to build it. If you are jumping and you have not built that network, I think no better time than to start now. Okay. So easy way to do this is to go through your phone, to go through your LinkedIn contacts, to go through anybody that you have come across with in your past that you had a strong relationship with, and to start there. Another tip that I want to offer underneath of this is to perhaps consider employing a career coach, and definitely consider an executive recruiter. Okay. As a senior leader, again, your brand is so important, as I mentioned earlier, and a career coach can really help you define and craft your brand. It's really important to have a beautiful resume at this level. It's really important that your LinkedIn looks amazing at this level. And there are so many tips and tricks out there now with LinkedIn and algorithm about job searching and job hunting. That's going to be really important. And so definitely a career coach that's worth their salt will be able to teach and talk to you about this. And I think it's really important too, again, at senior leader levels, is to understand how executive compensation works and how to negotiate your salary. It's not as simple, as just base and bonus. There's so many other perks, and executive compensation can be really tricky. And I think it's really important to understand, again, as a senior leader, what executive compensation looks like. And unless you've spent a lot of time understanding executive compensation, it can be very complex. So at times, employing somebody that knows the ins and outs of executive comp can be definitely valuable in helping to negotiate your next pay. So get some professionals if you need some help with that. Okay. Definitely worth it. And then the last one, and this is the one that's going to be big that I'm going to talk about, because as an executive coach, this is where I spend a lot of my time, is to help understand that you need to prepare for the feelings of discomfort. Okay. Sounds really fun, right? So when you go through this job search, your brain is in survival mode. And I think I want to implore you to remember that you are preparing yourself and to have to be ready for some uncomfortable feelings here. So your brain is going into survival mode because it's essentially equating this job hunt with survival. And it gets really fearful. It goes into scarcity mode and gets fearful that we are not going to live through this, that we may never find a job again, and we may not find as high paying of a job and the right level and right title. And we get really fearful. A lot of times, as senior leaders, you are the breadwinner of the family. So you feel the pressure of everyone relying on you and depending on you. And at times, your ego can be tied up in this too. Like, there can be shame through it, and there can be a lot of, again, discomfort and embarrassment about going through this job hunt. And I want you to know that you are 100% not alone, and that it is normal that the brain is going to offer some really not so fun thoughts and not so fun feelings to you as you go through this transition. And so that's why I say my last tip is to prepare for it, to know that it's totally normal and it's not necessarily factual. And your brain is going to offer you these thoughts as a way to try to keep you safe and a way to warn you of these perceived dangers. And so this might feel very uncomfortable to you. And so I want you to know that going through this process and being prepared for that and being able to coach yourself and get some support through it is going to be the biggest key to this puzzle. Okay. So, number one, you may feel uncomfortable because talking about yourself and focusing on yourself as this brand and being the asset of this job hunt can feel really uncomfortable at first. If you're not used to doing it, you're not used to consistently putting yourself out there, and that's going to feel awkward. Okay. So I want you to know, again, that's normal. Second, you might feel very scared and fearful about this uncertainty. When you're in the job hunt, you just don't know how it's going to work out until it does. And so financially, you go through scarcity and you're not sure what to expect and you don't know what's next. And so know that that is going to repeatedly come up for you. Again, normal. I know not easy, but normal. Okay. Third, you might feel a lot of rejection. You might feel a lot of failure. And it's super hard not to take this personal. It's hard not to get dejected through this. And so you have to set a plan for this, right? To be prepared to say, okay, if I don't immediately get all of these offers, what am I going to do and how am I going to feel about it? I know it's going to not feel great, but how do I plan to not take it personal and not let it discourage me? Okay. And I think you have to be ready. You have to set goals for yourself and be open. This is going to be like the scientific method on crack. We're going to have to try new things. We're going to have to be open to new experiments. We're going to have to be open to putting ourselves out there. And not all of it's going to work, especially as a senior leader. They say the longer your tenure, the higher your title, the longer the potential job hunt can be. Okay. It's not always the case, but a lot of times the amount of interviews and the amount of interview process you have to go through as a senior leader, it is sometimes longer. And so you have to be ready to run this marathon and to try new things and be ready for potential setbacks, potential failure through the process. And I say failure by just meaning you don't get every job that you apply for, right? So be ready. It's expected. It's normal. Nothing's going wrong with you. And it is not personal, even if you get and face rejection. Okay. And how do you plan for it? So really it's all about like, how do I set myself up to not lose faith through this process? Okay. And a great way to do this is definitely to talk to and surround yourself with someone that is going to hold belief in you, even if you are not holding belief for yourself. How do you talk to yourself in a way that you can be kind to yourself and give yourself grace? And sometimes you might need to have some money. Make sure you're building your network and building the people around you with people that believe in you. Okay. Even if sometimes you may not find that in your immediate network, you got to look for it, right? To find somebody that believes in you. And again, it may be a career coach, it may be executive recruiter, somebody that can help you through this process. And whose belief can you borrow if you need it? So who might have that faith in you, and whose belief can you go to and tap into if you need it? All right. All right, friends. So the belief in yourself and the value that you bring, everything you've achieved, that's what you get to carry with you. And it will not go away just because you change roles. Okay. All right. So that's what I wanted to leave you with today. I, again, have seen quite a few of you going through this job search and this transition and preparing for the transition. So I wanted you to leave you with a couple of thoughts about how to go through it in a way that can be productive. And again, if you need to employ help, by all means, go for it. If you need to talk to somebody about it and the mental mindset that you need to go through, do not hesitate to reach out. I want to assure you are not alone. And I know it feels that way at times, and it can feel very daunting as you go through this job hunt, but I promise you there is a light on the other side of this. Okay. As always, friends, if you want to reach out to me, you know how to get a hold of me. You can reach out to me through my website. It's Elisha Cowan Coaching, ELISIAKEOWN coaching.com. I'm always happy to help. And if you know somebody who needs some help or needs to hear this message, don't hesitate to share it with them. Okay. Thank you always for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Executive Coaching Podcast with Elisha Cowan. If you're ready to have an executive coach who's ready to help you lead your team to success, then book an introductory call at ElishaCowanCoaching.com/call.